Hi guys! The groundhog was onto something because it's been pretty warm outside and my brain is like, do you want to make a tank top? Now if you've watched any of my tutorials before, usually I'm just making accessories which are kind of like one size fits all, and I tell you the exact stitch count and then it's easy to just work it up from there. But I'm just going to be holding it up to my body and I'll kind of explain, depending on the size that you are, like this part of your shoulder to this part of your shoulder. So it's more like size it and just make it as you go. So this is my like half shirt prototype that I made just so that I knew where I was heading with it. But it's kind of an open mesh stitch, which is just made of double crochets. So it's super beginner friendly if you haven't done many big projects before. This will be really easy to do. I'll go step by step. I am making this out of cotton yarn so that it's more breathable for the summer. If you are going to use acrylic, just know that it might not be as like cool as cotton will be, but it is pretty open. There's lots of holes, so you might be okay. But just keep that in mind. I would opt for cotton. I'm using this yarn, which the yarn store kindly spun up for me. It's called Modern Cotton by Barocco, and it's a weight 4 yarn. I believe this color, it doesn't say on here, but I believe the color is Wharf. I looked it up online if you want the exact same one as me, which is not necessary, but just in case you were wondering. It also recommends a 5mm hook, which is the size I'll be using. You will also need scissors and a yarn needle and a few stitch markers as well. And you need your body, which I recommend while you make this, put something on that's a little bit tighter so that you don't have to keep taking your clothes on and off to try it on. And you want something like thin so that it's not adding extra inches to the measurements. We're gonna be making 2 panels. We're gonna do the front one first, and then we'll connect the back panel and then work as we go so that it will end up being connected like this. But our foundation row and first few rows of chains are gonna start up here. Okay, I just put it on over my shirt so you can see how to get this measurement. And depending on like the size ratio of your shoulders to your chest to your waist, you might have to alter this a little bit, but I will explain everything as I go. I'm starting where kind of my bra straps hit, and I'm just going to be chaining the length of this area. So from bra strap to bra strap all the way across my chest. And you can either measure that and then chain and then compare the measurement to the chain, or you could just chain as you go and kind of hold it up as you get more chains and make sure that it's the right length. So first I'm going to make a slip knot and insert that over my hook. Obviously, depending on your size, you're going to be doing a different amount of chains, but with the stitch we're doing, you want it to be an even number. So no matter how wide or how narrow yours is, make sure that you are landing on an even number. So I worked 44 chains. Your number might be different, doesn't matter as long as it's an even number. And I'm going to do 2 additional chains as my turning chain. Depending on what you're used to, you might work through these parts of a chain in your foundation row, but I'm actually gonna flip over my chain row and work into these little bumps. So with those 2 extra chains for a turning chain, I'm gonna work into the 3rd chain from my hook with a double crochet. So I'm yarning over, flipping my chain, and then working through that bump in the very back. Pulling up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And that is our first stitch. I'm going to do the exact same thing all the way across the row. So that row 1 is all double crochet. Again, I'm yarning over, inserting my loop into that bump in the back of my chain, pulling up a loop, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. I just finished my row of 44 chains, and that turning chain of 2 chains does not count as a stitch, by the way. And now I'm going to chain 2 again as my turning chain and turn my work. Now normally if we were just going to be doing another plain row of double crochet, I would just keep this chain 2, but the pattern we're going to be following is a double crochet followed by a chain, followed by a double crochet, chain, double crochet, chain. So I'm actually going to count these chain 2 as my first double crochet, And since the pattern is double crochet chain, I'm going to chain one more for a total of 3 chains. Then, skipping this first stitch, I'm going to do a double crochet into the next stitch through both of those loops. And then I'm going to chain 1 and repeat that. Double crochet, I'm skipping a stitch, going into the next one, double crochet, chain 1. Again, skipping the stitch directly next to the one I just worked into and double crocheting into the next one and chaining 1. Double crocheting, skipping a stitch, chaining 1. So as you can see with that chain 3, this kind of looks like one of these double crochet. And to make my life easier later, and if you're a beginner this will be really helpful, is I'm going to put a stitch marker in that last chain before my double crochet, so the 3rd chain, because that's going to count as the last space that I work a stitch into on my 3rd row. So I'm just sticking a stitch marker through that chain. Now I'm going to finish this all the way down, and I'll come back and show you how to finish off row 2. Now if you have an even number of stitches, you should be left with 2 stitches left after I just did a double crochet and a chain 1. And I'm just going to finish my last double crochet into the last stitch of that row. Now for the next row, we're repeating the pattern we did for row 1. So I'm starting by chaining 2 and turning my work. But you'll notice now that we have these big gaps, it might not be obvious where to work those double crochets into. So for the first double crochet, this chain 2 does not count as a stitch. So I'm going to find my first double crochet here, and that's the first stitch I'm working into with a double crochet. Now my next stitch I would work into is this chain 1 that's making this gap here. And you could technically work your double crochet into the chain, but that gets really tedious, and as you start working faster, it's just a lot easier to work just over the chain. So how that works is I'll just yarn over, insert my hook into this open square gap and pull up a loop, and then finish my double crochet, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Repeating that again, finding this next double crochet and working a double crochet into the top of the stitch, and then finding the gap, yarning over, inserting my hook, pulling up a loop, and finishing a double crochet. And you're going to do this all the way across, so anytime there is a hole, you're going to work into that space, and anytime there's a double crochet, you're going to work into the top of the chain. I'll come back when I'm at the end of my row. I'm getting towards the end of my row. I just worked into this space right here, and I have another double crochet. I'm going to work up here, and then this stitch that we marked, which is the top chain of that chain 3, I'm going to work into both of those. So one more double crochet into this top of the last double crochet, and then into the top of this chain space I'm going to do my last double crochet. I love how this stitch looks worked up. I think it's starting to look really good. So I'll show you one more time this row with the spaces. I'm going to chain 3, remember, and turn my work. And that last chain is going to be marked with my stitch marker. Then skipping this first double crochet, I'm going to work into the next stitch because this counts as double crochet and chain 1. So skipping that first stitch down there, double crochet, chain 1, skip, double crochet, chain 1, and work all the way down. Then at the end of your row, after double crochet, chain 1, you should have 2 stitches left, and your last stitch will be a double crochet. And here is what it should look like. I'll hold this up to me and show you in a second, but you're basically going to be working this until you reach kind of where your armpit is, doing these double crochet chain 1 rows ending with a double crochet, chaining 2, turning your work, double crocheting all the way down, not forgetting to work your last double crochet into this top chain, chaining 3, turning your work, skipping the first double crochet, and doing the double crochet chain 1 pattern all the way down with your last stitch being a double crochet. Okay, so I've been repeating that same pattern that I just showed you for a while now, and the way I'm telling when to start my increases is eventually this panel is going to need to connect back here to the back panel. So kind of, I know it's hard to tell because it's dark, but the seam of my shirt I'm wearing is right here. So we need to get the width of this over to connect to the back. I'm just going to be doing 2 decreases on the double crochet rows. Here's how to do that also. I'm sorry for my like disgustingly grown out bangs. I'm trying to grow them out and they don't reach back into anything yet, so they just kind of like antenna out below my ears, so sorry about that. So here I've done 14 rows of the normal stitch pattern alternating double crochet and mesh rows, and now I'm going to do my increases. So you want to make sure that no matter how long or short you're making this first part, you want to end on a mesh row because we're only going to be increasing on these solid double crochet rows. So from my last mesh row, I'm going to chain 2 and turn my work, and we're going to work into that first double crochet twice and then into this chain space twice. So anytime we increase, we're going to be doing it twice so that we maintain the multiples of 2 that we started with our first initial chain. So I'm going to be doing 2 separate sets of increases. So I'll have 2 double crochet, 2 double crochet for a total of 4 stitches, and then continue like normal. So let's say you wanted to increase at a more rapid rate. If you're doing a larger size, you could either do 2 like I'm doing, you could do 4, or you could even do 6 sets of increases. But I'm just going to show you what the 2 look like. So I yarn over, insert my hook into that first double crochet and complete a double crochet, and then into that same space that I just worked right here, I'm going to work 1 more double crochet, and that's 1 increase. Now for our second increase, I'm going to work into this chain space by yarning over, inserting my hook, completing a double crochet, and doing it again into that same exact space. So now where there normally would have just been 2 double crochets, we made 4. So our row is going to start to widen. Now I'm going to continue just doing regular double crochets into either the top of a double crochet or a chain space all the way down until I have 4 stitches left on my row. So I'll meet you on the other side. So I just worked double crochet along that entire row, and now I have 2 stitches left. If you are doing 4 sets of increases, then I would leave 4 stitches left, and if you are doing 6 sets of increases, I would leave 6 stitches left. So into these last 2 stitches, remember, normally I would work into the top of this last double crochet and then also this top chain. Don't forget about that chain. So I'm going to do 2 double crochets into this double crochet and then 2 double crochets into the top of this chain. So after this double crochet increase row, I'm going to follow with just another plain mesh row. So nothing is different for this except I will have a few extra stitches because we increased, but everything about this is just a normal mesh row. We're not increasing here at all. So I will come back when I work this row all the way down. And there we have another mesh row. Now I'm going to repeat this double crochet increase row again by chaining 2, turning my work, whoops, and then doing 2 double crochet in the first stitch of the row. There's 1, same hole, there's 2, into the chain space I'm doing 2 double crochet, there's 1, same hole, there's 2, and now I have 2 more increases, and I'm going to double crochet all the way down my row, and on my last 2 stitches I will do 2 more sets of increases, or however many you are doing. So now you can see from here where we started our increases, it's growing in width. I realized when I initially filmed the increase part, for some reason I did decreases. So I had to go back in time, and I've already done part of the back, which you can ignore for a second because I'm going to show you how to do that after this. I fixed it and I did increases now. So that was a little frustrating because sometimes you think you got it and your brain's just not on the same page. So here we are. So this is my first row of increases and this is my second row of increases. And right where I started that mesh stitch row after my last row of increases is where I'm going to end up connecting it to the back. So you can see how it fits straight, and then you have this piece that comes out and you'll be able to connect it back there, and same thing on this side. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is stopping here for now, finishing my back panel, which I'll show you how to do. I'll explain this close up, but the back, we're just going to work on connecting it at a few points here. And then I hope you can see this, but we're just working across this way. So I have my new skein and I'm going to make a slip knot and throw that on my hook. And I'm going to start on the right side where my tail is, because I like to tie these two tails together just for a little extra layer of security. So I have my slip knot on my hook. I'm going to find that first stitch we did, and through both parts of that V, I'm going to insert my hook and pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through the other loop on my hook. Then I'm going to chain 2 and do 6 double crochet. Depending on the size you're making, you might want this number to be less or more. This is basically just a very small piece that's going to be connecting the panels together. It's not meant to be like a strap, so I'm not going to be making it any longer like this way. I'm just creating enough for the back to grab onto. As you can see, that's what I did here. I only did 5, it looks like, but this kind of shows you how those panels are going to be connected. Again, if you're on the smaller side, you might want to do maybe 4 instead of 6. And if you're maybe extra large and up, I would do anywhere from 6 to 10 double crochets. So this technically would be our left shoulder. And then we also need to create 6 double crochets on our right shoulder. So after I did these 6 double crochets, or however many you did, you're going to count how many stitches are between this stitch and then 6 from the end. I'm actually going to start by counting 6 stitches from the left side, or my right shoulder, and then I'm going to put a stitch marker. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I worked into this stitch. I'm not going to count that, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 32 stitches between these 6 on the ends. So I'm going to chain 32. 2, 3, 4. So I chained 32, and now you'll see that should be the same length as your stitch marker to your last double crochet. So now I'm just going to insert my hook where I have my stitch marker and finish with 6 double crochet. Before we go any further, just make sure you can fit your head through this hole, and if you can't, I would remove maybe 2 or whatever stitches until you can fit your head through. So to make it kind of a mirror image on the back to match the front, I'm going to copy and have this first row here be double crochet before I start my mesh stitch. So from here all the way across, I'm going to work solid double crochet. I'm chaining 2 as my turning chain. Now I'm working double crochet all the way across. And with our foundation row, instead of working into the V, we worked into that bottom bump, which creates like a nice finished edge. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take the chain and actually turn so that the V is facing towards me, and then further to find the bumps on the back. So I have to kind of twist it for the first few stitches, but as you work down, it'll be easier to work into. And as you can see, it creates kind of a nicer connection than just taking the edges of something and sewing them together. So for the rest of the back panel, I'm finishing this last row of double crochet and then continuing. So I will be back once I basically make another copy of the front again, connected here for the back piece. I look like in like elementary school gym when you would play like capture the flag and they made you put on those stupid jerseys to like show who's on what team, and they looked like this. I have the back panel done exactly the same way that I did the front panel, and I have poorly connected them because I ran out of stitch marker, so we have a paper clip doing the heavy lifting, but it's working fine. The goal now is to do this thing, the rest of the shirt. You could technically leave it cropped, but I found that I don't wear crop tops as much. Maybe like to the beach with a bathing suit underneath would be cute, but my intention was to wear this more like on a daily basis in the spring or summer, not just like as a beach cover up. So I'm gonna go longer. Also, a note that this is a little tight here. I made it so that they almost fit because I know I'm gonna block this. The yarn I got is machine washable, so I figured it's gonna get wet eventually. I'm gonna have to wash it, so I might as well block it, and that's gonna make it a little bigger. So it is a little bit tight here, but I know it will loosen up. I'm not worried about it. If you're not gonna block it, then I would obviously make it fit you. But also, like, stuff does stretch out as you wear it, so whatever, ignore what I'm saying. But now I want to make the bottom, and I kind of want it to hit where the shirt is hitting, like right at the edge of my pants. So like if we did the math, it would kind of be, how many rows? I think around like 10 rows more. And I'm definitely going to increase because I want it to kind of like flare out a little bit. I have a feeling if I do the same thing I did before, where I did 2 increases on each side, it's gonna get too wide too fast. So my plan is to do only 1 set of increases on each side so that I have a total of 2, 1 and 1, so that it just like is a consistent flare. So I'm gonna see if that works. I hope it works. Wish me luck. Again, I only had like 2 stitch markers left and they were under too much pressure, those little plastic guys. So this isn't holding, but imagine that's connected there. The paper clip's held on though. I did increases for 6 solid double crochet rows, and after my non-increase rows, that totals 11 additional rows. So we had the 14 normal, the increase, the normal, the increase. So let's connect the sides. That should be easy. I think I'll have, oh, for sure, I have enough yarn left on my skeins to just use that to sew up the sides. But if you ran out of yarn, you can just reattach more. I'll show you in a minute. So since these are like mirror images of each other, the front and back panels, both of my last double crochet rows ended with the yarn on the same side. So I'm gonna have to reattach some over here to do this seam. But I can at least do one of them for now. So I'm actually gonna take this yarn and tie this off. And this is gonna be the one we'll move. This is the front panel, but it doesn't really matter. So to tie off, I just chain 1 extra and pull the yarn all the way through. And then I'm just gonna cut a tail that's long enough to weave in. So the first thing I'm gonna do is turn it inside out. I had marked with this stitch marker where the front right side out was facing. So I'm gonna flip it inside out. And then I'm gonna find where that increase started up under the armpit. So I remember I had done 14 rows before starting my increases, so I'm going to count where that would be. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So this was my first increase row, second increase row, and then I'm going to mark here with the stitch marker. So right below your last increase row is where you'll want to connect them. So I'm going to mark that on both sides with a stitch marker. And that is where my seam will end. So I'm going to start here and stitch all the way up and stop there. So now with my 2 sides together, I'm going to insert my hook here where this very last stitch is. And I'm going to find the same space on the other side. Then taking my working yarn, I'm going to pull up a loop and chain 1. Now to connect these panels, I'm actually going to be doing a slip stitch, but long story short, if we do a slip stitch kind of with the same tension as this, it's gonna be too tight because we're not working horizontally into the stitches like normal, we're working vertically. and the stitches are taller than they are wide. So if you do it a normal slip stitch, they're gonna kind of like get condensed up and it's gonna be too tight, and a slip stitch does not stretch. So just keep that in mind as you're working across this seam, that you're leaving a little bit looser tension. As you can see, we have the double crochet rows and then the mesh rows, and I'm gonna insert my hook once into the middle of the double crochet, once into the mesh, once into the double crochet, and once into the mesh all the way up. So I'm just gonna find the top of that double crochet, and there are these 2 loops there. And same thing on the other side. I'm gonna find that double crochet, insert my hook into 2 loops, I yarn over, and then I'm gonna pull up a little bit again to create a little more of a loose tension, and then pull my hook through. Then into the mesh stitch, I'm gonna find that top of that double crochet and insert my hook into this hole. It doesn't have to be super specific, you just wanna make sure it's the same on both sides. So I'm gonna find the exact same space on the back and then pull up a loop and pull that through the loop on my hook. And then again, the double crochets, I put it through those 2 loops. And I pull up a loop and pull it through the one on my hook. Now we have a mesh row. I insert my hook. Same part on both sides. And pull through. And you'll notice right away if your tension is too tight or if it's good. Honestly, mine is a little tight, but from now on, I'll just adjust that. If this is something you struggle with, you could even work with a little bit of a bigger hook, just to make sure that those aren't too tight. I'm gonna continue this all the way until I reach my stitch marker up here. Okay, now I'm just gonna work single crochet, and similarly to the slip stitch, you don't want it to be too tight, otherwise it's gonna crush the mesh stitches. Every time I say that, it's such a mouthful. Tongue twister. Mesh stitches. You want to just have like a looser tension. So the first one I'm gonna do, actually before I do that, I'm gonna tie this off. Now inserting my hook again where I just was and chaining 1. So anywhere that I find a hole, I'm just gonna work a single crochet. It doesn't need to be perfect. I'm just like being a little intuitive with this. Again, you want like a looser tension here. And this is what it's gonna look like. It just kind of finishes off that raw edge a little bit, and it's gonna give you a little extra strength, and it's not gonna pull these stitches loose too much. The pattern I'm kind of following is I work into the mesh stitch hole here, and then I work in this double crochet right here. I'm working 1 into the top hole and then 1 into the bottom, 1 into the mesh stitch, and so on. Then eventually you will make it back to where you started, and you're gonna find that first single crochet and just slip stitch to it and pull your yarn through with an extra chain, trim off, leaving a good sized tail for weaving in, and pull your yarn through. And there you have the seam and a nice trim. I'm gonna turn it right side out just to show you. And then we'll do the exact same thing on the other side. So here's what that seam looks like, which will relax a little bit once we block it. And then the single crochet, you can see those beautiful chains. I'll come back when I do the same thing on the other side, and then I'll show you how to block it if you are interested. Otherwise, that's it. Okay, hello. I have my steamer heating up. I decided to steam block it because I feel like it might not stretch as drastically. And I tried it on again without this t-shirt under it, and I think the main goal with the blocking is to make this top part stretch a little bit wider and then to overall make it a little longer. But I do like how wide this bottom part is, so I'm not going to pull that as tight. This angle is really funny. So it's currently right side out and it's dry. So like wet blocking, you would submerge it in water with wool wash or whatever and like let it soak. For steam blocking, you start with a dry piece. And then I have these knit blockers, which are basically just these plastic pieces with like spiky needles sticking out that I can stick into this foam board. And this foam board is actually a piece of our gym flooring from the basement, so you gotta get crafty sometimes. I'm gonna start by just pinning the top here into place where we did those shorter rows of double crochet. And you want to make sure when you're pinning you're going through both layers, the front and back panel. And then I'm going to go kind of in the middle here and make sure I'm grabbing both layers and just stretch this into place. Same thing over here. I'm going to keep going down these armholes. Actually, I'll use these. Like slightly stretching it side to side. And then I'm going to pull this part under the arm over and down, but it just depends on how you want yours to fit. If it's a little too narrow or a little too short or whatever, just pull and adjust as needed. And then, as I said, I want to make it slightly longer, but I don't want this to shorten, so I'm going to do a few more pins in the sides. And then overall, I want to pull this longer. I just realized my mic wasn't recording, sorry. Sorry if it's echoey. And then on the neck, I just want to make sure it doesn't end up like scooping down, so I'm just gonna put a few. I love how that straight across like boat neck looks on me. She's stretched and ready to be steamed. I had to switch sides because my steamer is plugged in over there. But then you just take your steamer, or I've seen people do this with an iron. If you have like the button that goes psh and like pushes all the steam out when you pour the water in, do you know what I'm talking about? I've seen people hold their iron above their work if you don't have a steamer. Lightly going over and making sure it's really getting through by feeling how like wet it's getting. You can also just like use your fingers to help stretch it out and get it more relaxed. And don't forget about the edges as well. Those feel so good. And now that I've steamed it for a little bit, I'm actually going to pull it a little bit wider with these pins, because now that the fibers are relaxed, I can pull it a little more. And then I'm going to do it again. Another thing to focus on when you're steaming is wherever you did the seams on the sides, it can kind of be a little bit thicker, so it's a good opportunity to blast those and then like squish it down with your fingers so that it's a flat seam and not like a bulky round one. I'm not gonna lie, another reason why I steam blocked it is so I don't have to wait for like 3 days for it to dry. I'll probably come back tomorrow. I'm gonna let this sit and cool off and just have its moment, and I will come back tomorrow and try it on and show you the finished product. Okay, you gotta ignore my pants. Close your eyes. I finally finished the shirt. I just weaved in my ends, which that always sounds grammatically incorrect. And it dried overnight. I steam blocked it yesterday. After blocking it, this part here got a lot looser, which I was kind of worried it would be too small. But you just gotta trust the process because it ended up turning out really nice. I love it. And I know in the beginning of this video, I was like, it's warm outside, but now it's cold again, so I have to wait till I can wear this without anything over it. But I hope that if you made this, you like how it turned out too. Sometimes it's nice to make stuff like fit to your own body, where you're like holding it up as you go. I've made patterns before where I like follow the gauge swatch and the correct sizing with measurements and everything, and it ends up not even fitting after all that work. So sometimes it's good to learn how things are constructed so you can just make them to fit yourself. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely leave a comment if you want to see more of these laid back tutorials in the future. I recently switched my personal Instagram with like my crochet related Instagram because I just wasn't posting crochet content on my personal Instagram because I felt like weird about it. So anyway, I made a crochet Instagram. I'm still trying to like build my posts up on there and stuff, but if you've previously followed me on Instagram, you might have to follow me again because the account name switched, but it like didn't transfer people over anyway. But yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. I've been posting a lot on my story as I make stuff. So definitely follow if you want to see like more behind the scenes stuff. And I also have a TikTok too, which I'm trying to be more active on these days. So follow me if you want, subscribe if you want to see more videos, and I'll see you later.